So welcome again to Incest AWARE's first ever Outspoken discussion series event. Our Outspoken talks feature experts in the field of incest prevention and healing and activism. And these talks are really designed to inspire and educate all of us as survivors and as advocates for prevention. So for those of you who are joining one of Incest AWARE's events for the first time, whether you're on the Zoom call today or you're watching this recording, welcome. What began as an incest web resource in October of 2020 has now grown into a soon-to-be nonprofit organization, which is really exciting for us. Incest AWARE is working to end incest abuse. We raise awareness of the epidemic of sexual violence in family systems. We mobilize to support survivors and their loved ones along their healing journeys. And we also mentor incest prevention advocates who are using their personal experiences with abuse to transform them into positive social change. So our vision, and this Outspoken series is really nested in that, is a world in which people are safe from incest abuse. But until then, we envision a community in which survivors and those who care for them are heard, believed, and supported. And so you can learn more about us at incestaware.org. So now, without further ado, let's get to our speaker. I am so fortunate to have Pennie Saum here with me today as our inaugural speaker for this series. Pennie is an author, a speaker, an advocate, a law changer, which is my particular favorite in your bio, law changer, and voice seeker who has dedicated her life to helping victims unleash their voice and move through trauma and grief. She is the founder and director of Brave and Unbroken. She has a passion for helping incest and child sexual abuse victims to become thrivers. Pennie is determined to impact those who are struggling with the trauma of incest and child sexual abuse. She's an advocate for incest and child sexual abuse victims at the hand of military soldiers. So Pennie brings her passion, her very loud passion, to help survivors in all that she does. She also facilitates writing to heal sessions for victims of sexual trauma. Pennie resides in the Pacific Northwest and loves the outdoors. Another reason why I love Pennie is she loves the outdoors. So wow, I am so happy and honored to welcome you here, Pennie. You have done so much for survivors, both with your own healing journey and to help others with theirs, so that we can all get centered here and just know a little bit about you, hear from you, hear how you develop this fierce passion for helping survivors. Why don't you tell us about your early life? What was your childhood like, and what were some defining moments for you that you can remember?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just honored to be asked to do this, and just the amazing work that you and Incest AWARE are doing. So thank you for just braving this. And as you are developing Incest AWARE and it's just blowing up, I just thank you for embracing it and taking it and becoming what it needs to be. So thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate it. My name is Pennie Saum. I go by she, her pronouns. So thank you. And my childhood was interesting. I'm a military kid. I raised in the military Army life. My biological father was a military officer, U.S. Army. And I have a younger brother, 4 years younger. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom most of the time. She worked during our school hours, so she put us on the bus and took us off the bus and did Avon and those kinds of things in her off hours. What most people didn't know was our Army officer father, who was forward facing to the world as the military soldier, decorated, degree holding hero, as people would label him, church going, Sunday school type person, was doing really horrific things behind closed doors. And I used to say, if walls could talk, the stories they would tell were pretty horrendous. And so one key thing about my childhood was I was being sexually and emotionally abused, and basically incest. It was incest by our biological father. And my brother was also experiencing the same thing, as well as being physically abused by our father. What we didn't know is it was happening to both of us under the same roof, and we didn't know about each other. This is the only way to explain it is that's exactly what grooming is. Manipulation, violence. He was the epitome of what you read about in the news. And he was also very violent and controlling of our mother, and had us all three convinced that if we did what we were supposed to under his control, that the others would be protected. And so as a young child, I went through life thinking that I was protecting the rest of my family by doing what I was told. And it was like an innate learning. It was almost like I was born with that learning. And so that kind of gives you an insight to what my childhood was like.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So would you say from the outside looking in, if someone had just met you and met your family for the first time, what would they think about your family?
Oh, your typical go to church on Sundays, sidelines at the soccer field every weekend, Girl Scouts, Bible study, family dinners, every night. No different. It'd be like your neighbor, your normal neighborhood family. Mm-hmm. Family parties, kids would birthday parties where other kids would come, card parties where other families would join, very typical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So maybe no one would even notice from the outside that anything was happening in your family.
Absolutely.
So take us back to the moments when you started your healing process, or you were at the moment where you began to transition into healing. Mm-hmm. As you think back, was there a point in time that you can remember that sort of got you on that path to healing from your incest experience? Like, were there any early steps that you took to address the abuse? How did you begin to find some sense of inner peace?
Yeah, I would say there was little moments as I went through life, where I'd find a little bit more courage and a little more courage and a little more courage. I witnessed my biological father kind of attack my mom once, and I found this just anger that built inside of me as I began to realize the lie that I was I had believed all these years, that I was protecting them. And in reality, I started to realize that it wasn't possible for me to protect them from him. And then started to find my voice, like, don't you ever touch her again. Don't do that. And then finding my voice and like, don't you ever touch me again. Now, mind you, this is at age 17. So him in court admitting it started at infancy. So I was abused by him sexually from infancy in diapers to age 17. I really did think I would take it to my grave. Like, he had me so convinced and so manipulated that I would never be able to tell the story. My brother, on the other hand, him being the courageous, brave one, his trigger of getting to a place where he could speak out is when I realized I didn't want him in a place where no one would believe him. And his courage is what triggered my courage. And that's what started the healing process. When we could stand up in court and say, the man there in the orange suit and the shackles did this to us, and judge, have no mercy on him because he had no mercy on us. That is when the true healing began. When we were believed and we had other adults look at us and say, we will believe you, we believe you, and he's going away, he's going to pay. That's when the true healing began.
Did you feel that that was the first time that you were really validated, that your experiences were validated and you felt supported and you felt like people were finally coming to help, coming to rescue you, coming to help you move forward in your life? Was that the first time?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was the first time. The really first time was when my mother, when she had the reality hit her of what had happened, and amongst her pain and hurt, she stood up on her 2 feet and she protected her kids when she finally could. That was the first time. And I get it all the time. How could your mom not know? How could this? How could that? Well, when you're in the midst of incest or sexual abuse and you really understand what grooming really is about, manipulation and violence really is about, you'll get it. Absolutely will understand it. But that was the first time. When my mom looked at us and said, I believe you, and I will never, ever, ever let this happen again. Absolutely. But then for us, a court to like say, okay, yes, he's a military officer, but we don't care. He's going to pay the price. And this is the thing I tell survivors and kids. You tell someone the first time and they don't believe you, tell again and tell again and tell again, and make your voice louder and louder and bigger and bigger. And we will find someone will, or call me, and they will believe you that sometimes it takes a couple of times to get there. Because I had told in many, many ways throughout the years, but people didn't hear me, right? I was not equipped with the language to be able to get people to hear me as a child. And that's also why we teach what we teach, right? In incest and child abuse protection in kids. Teach your kids the right body parts, right? We don't want a child to go to school to say, Daddy ate my cookie last night. Okay, did you get another cookie? That's not going to get a child the protection they need. We need kids to know the language. So this is the vernacular, the understanding, the language that as a child, had I been taught the right things and the language to be able to tell what was going on to me, it would have been a different story, right? Could have potentially been a different story. So being able to educate kids and families on the right ways to talk and tell at a way earlier age makes that silence break and the shame break free way earlier, not a situation that I was in.
Yes. And then there's the other side of that, which is adults taking responsibility.
Absolutely.
Signs that a child is being abused or that an adult is at risk for abusing a child. And even if it's an uncomfortable situation, to do what they need to do to protect that child. And so often I have conversations with people and focused entirely on the child's responsibility to tell, which is a really important piece. We want to empower kids to do that. But the real responsibility for action lies with adults. And so, I mean, I love how you stress the empowerment piece and keep speaking up for yourself and keep advocating for yourself. That's such an important message. So Pennie, when did you realize that you wanted to start speaking out? So you had a moment where you began to feel validated and you began to sense your own power. How did you make that transition over into speaking out and advocating, not only on behalf of yourself, but also other survivors? Was it sort of a slow process, or did you have like a light bulb moment that now was the right time for you?
Well, for those who know me, there's not much that goes slow in my head, especially in the age of the internet. When that all happened, it was slow. That was slow then, right? That was in 1994. My biological father was prosecuted then. And I would mention it slowly in a kind of silent, quiet way to a few people that I knew. And I would have more and more people quietly whisper to me, I've never told anyone. I've never told anyone, my dad, my brother, my mother, my cousin, this happened to me, this happened to me. I'm not, like 8 out of 10 people would say, I've never told anyone. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And there are hundreds of people that I've spoken to over the course of this one, like that first year, that are sitting in this place where I was sitting. What are we going to do? Well, during that time, I was also going through night terrors, financial situations, all the things that come with. Now, I never went to drugs and alcohol and living on the streets, but there's a lot of complications that come with abuse. A lot of situations trying to figure out who you are. How do you make it through every single day? Child abuse can be a life sentence, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a bad life sentence, but it's not something that ever goes away. And so the first few years was, how do I get through this? How do I go to EMDR therapy so I can sleep through the night? How do I add hours, you know? And so as the time went on and I heard these stories over and over and over and people confiding in me, I realized that my story needed to be told on a broader spectrum. Hello, internet. And I started blogging. Here's what I went through today. Here's what I saw. Here's what this like panic attack I had going down the road. Or I had to go to prison and visit my brother. So how do these things tie in? And so I just started sharing my story, and I got it on Facebook, and I got it out there. And that's where it evolved. That's where it began. And then my mother got lung cancer. And that's when I realized that I could no longer be quiet about the actual incidences that happened. And I wrote my memoir, and it just evolved from there to help people really be able to unleash their voice.
Wow. So what a process. So hearing from so many people that they have never told anybody about their abuse. And, and we know this, for those of us who have been doing this for a while and involved in prevention and helping survivors, we know how few people actually tell anyone, how few children. I mean, for sure, how few children. But even some people will live almost their entire lives, or their entire lives not telling the soul, which really strikes me here, because you think of all that pain and suffering that is never addressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hidden inside. Wow, so many of us can relate to that. So looking back, as you think about this time in your life, what tools and support did you find? And maybe you didn't even see it as tools and support at the time, but looking back, how did you develop the confidence and the speaking ability and your leadership qualities? Because looking at you here, you are confident, you are articulate, your leadership is just really shows. How did you get there? How did you find the support? How did you build your network?
Yeah, so lots of counseling, lots of therapy. I highly recommend therapy, whether you think you're healed, whether you've been through incest or you haven't. A third party outside of your world to talk through things is vital, absolutely vital. And mentors, lots of mentors. I really plugged in with people who were older than me, who were younger than me, who had different experiences than me. I had some phenomenal people who poured themselves to help me really develop who I was, to figure out my why and my purpose, and really figure out where I needed to go and why. And I also decided too, in that time frame, that if I didn't have an audience, if one person read my memoir, if one person read my blog, that was my purpose. It was one person. That's fine. That's all that mattered. If we only sold one book, that was okay, because that's what it was about. If it helped one person, that's all I cared about. In all of my ventures, that's my approach with everything. And so that's where it came from. And then an email would come. And because of your memoir, I was able to do this, or I saw, you spoke at this event and I was able to talk about this scenario. And the more voices that got unleashed, the more confident you become. And I think for me, the more I could talk about my story, the more that the shame and silence was broken, the more the voice was unleashed. I almost sometimes feel a little guilty. I don't know if you ever do, that it's almost, I kind of do a disclaimer, like, for instance, when we did the law passing, when I was fighting for that, because my father was military. When he retired, he never had to pay a dime of the $5 million lawsuit against him for the damages. He never paid a dime because his military retirement was protected. And I did not want that to happen to any other child. Never. And all of our therapy monies, everything came out of our pocket. And I didn't want that to happen to anyone else. And so I went to bat. I went to fight it. And Como News picked up the story. And they were like, tell us the details, and I said, are you sure? Like, I find myself trying to protect the people who are asking me about the story, right? Do you really want to, like, how many details do you really want? You know what I mean? This is what I find myself like kind of disclaiming, because I find it now so easy to talk about. And I don't know if you're in the same situation, that because I've been talking about it for so long. And I find that when survivors can break that silence, whatever your story may be, whatever your childhood trauma may be, or sexual assault, or whatever you've been through, when you've broken that silence and that shame, and you realize it's not your fault, that you did nothing wrong, that confidence just builds and builds and builds. And you know that someone needs to know they're not alone. And that's where it just continues to grow.
And I am a huge proponent, and Incest Aware as an organization is a huge proponent of role models, of role modeling, because when people listen to you, Pennie, and they hear you tell your story, and they see you confidently, projecting and sharing, with and working through that shame, right? And working through those things that hold so many of us back. It sends the message to others that you can do this too. And so I think for our movement, for everything that we're trying to do for survivors, serving as that role model, serving as that leader that other people can aspire to be and learn from is so, so important for us. And that's a lot of the reason why I like to have these types of events, because they showcase people who, maybe 20 years ago, if someone knew you, they would know a very different Pennie than who they, and maybe not, maybe not, but this definitely does change you, this advocacy road. It does, but it's so worthwhile.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you tell us a little bit more about Brave and Unbroken? You spoke a little bit about what you were doing, other advocacy. So first of all, why did you decide to call it that? And can you tell us a little bit about what the organization does?
Yeah, so it's actually Brave and Unbroken Project now. There was a group of people, and actually Kat Caparello helped me with the book, because I didn't want to be your typical memoir, this date to this date to this date. I wanted to kind of intertwine my mom's cancer journey with the family secrets of the abuse, because it kind of all ties together. And we were sitting around doing a live out loud editing reading. And we were just stuck. I was just like, I just don't know what to call it. And one, actually Kat's wife said, I really think Brave and Unbroken, you are the epitome of Brave and Unbroken. And that's where it came from, was a collective community of people coming together to help each other. And as we went through that, we realized that we wanted an organization. Now, at the time, we were thinking it was not going to be a nonprofit. We weren't sure we wanted to be a nonprofit, what we wanted to do. But we realized that we needed to be bigger than ourselves, and that we wanted a way to be able to stretch. And at the beginning, we really wanted to just do darkness to light prevention training, because we, as you said at the beginning, we really truly believe that childhood abuse, sexual abuse, and incest prevention and stopping it belongs with adults. And so I went and got trained. I became a facilitator. A couple of the board members as well with us did that as well. And we just trained as many people as we could. As donations came in, we used that money and we went and trained more people. And then my day job, they allowed us to train people on our lunch breaks. And April came and we trained more people. And so that's what it was originally, it was about. Let's train to prevent. And then we're like, what if we take the memoir and we create a stage play? So we created a stage play because we're like, we want to help also survivors of childhood sexual abuse and incest be able to unleash their voices. And I just felt so strongly that those without a platform, those who are not in the news, those who are not part of USA swimming teams, those who are not famous actors and actresses, needed a platform to be able to feel empowered enough to speak up and unleash their voices. So what if we have a stage play that tells the story? And I kind of, attest it to the end of church, right? With an altar call kind of. And if you want to do this, you don't have to say anything, but you can put your handprint on our big mural board with your days of silence in the middle of your hand. We were just how do we just do this? How do we get creative? How do we do all these ways? And then COVID. So in January before COVID, we had this amazing run through, and then we haven't been able to do it. And so we've been, how do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this? And then we landed a TED Talk. And I say we because it's a collective we. It's not just me. It's not just me. But we got a TED Talk through Beacon Street, and phenomenal people helped make it happen digitally. Some of you have probably seen it. And we've been able to launch Loud. Love yourself, own your story, unleash your voice, and dare to be loud. And that's just the root of what we're beginning to do with Writing to Heals, with the stage play at some point, with a creative theatrical loud retreat. And then this program we're getting ready to partner with another person on for survivors to come together to be able to work through the Loud project together. So all of these pieces being what Brave and Unbroken is going to do. And then I have a consulting business on the side of that really wants to help mentor people, which is my passion. Helped mentor people through this same thing that I've been through to, help them dig within inside of themselves. What's their why? What's their purpose? And to flourish into whatever that is and whatever it looks like for them. So that's what we're doing.
Wow. So one of the things I love, and we were talking about this before we started this talk, one of the things I love about what you do is you use a lot of creative forces and creative opportunities for people to express themselves, to heal, to be loud, right? And so many organizations, we sort of do what we do in sort of classic traditional ways. And it sounds like you're kind of breaking that mold a little bit to involve people in ways that might feel a little bit more organic. And I love how you sort of have pivoted and moved and sort of found your way. And as an organization, a fairly new organization founder, I can relate to that, because you start this journey. You don't know what things will be like in 10 years. You're just swimming along, just trying to make your vision come alive. And I can sense your passion. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So tell us about your book. Tell us what it was like to write your book. I know so many people who have written books, and some people, it seems like everyone has a different experience. Did the writing, the publishing process play out as you had expected? Were there any, bumps in the road? Were there any unexpected joys? What was that like for you?
Well, when I approached my friend Kat and said, I want to write my story down, not so much because I wanted to tell anybody else about it, but it was more for me. I thought, great. My mom had just passed away. I hadn't told my mom any of the details. I didn't want to hurt her any more than she had been hurt. And so I had this cancer journey of my mom, which was traumatic, extremely traumatic. Many, many things I learned through that, which I would do again. So I wanted to tell that. And then we had the whole incest and family abuse and also family secrets, right? Interwoven. And so she sat on it for a couple of weeks and we met up and she said, I don't think these are two stories. She says, I think this is one story. And that's kind of where it all evolved. I'm like, oh, you just kicked me in the knee, because I know you're right. I knew she was right. But I also was overwhelmed by this is a lot. And so we did a lot of phone calls and a lot of note taking. I had written things down over the years. I had pieces of paper everywhere. And so that whole process was like 3 years. Not only was it kind of my kind of digging deep and having some emotional kind of draws, but it was very emotional for her. And now there wasn't necessarily a personal tie to incest or anything, but when you're talking about the details that we're talking about, as you know, they're ugly, dark, emotionally draining details. And so looking at a wall of Post-it notes with the details that we're talking about and trying to align them and be different was just really emotionally draining. And so we'd work for a while and then we'd have to just sit on it. And we'd come back to it and then we'd sit on it. And so we didn't do a lot of querying. I didn't go after a literary agent or someone to publish it. We just did it ourselves. We had a professional editor and then I self-published it. And it was not what I expected. There's a lot. And you can't get rich on books unless you have somebody famous like Glennon Doyle Melton or, I don't know, whoever, as an author. But we've sold 300 copies. I feel good about that. I'm fine with that. Because we've gotten emails and phone calls about how it's helped other people. And that's what I'm here for. My whole purpose in life is to help other people be able to unleash their voices from whatever they have and to get unstuck. And so that process was a learning process. It helped build confidence. It also broke me down, and built us back up. And so without those steps, the steps of that and the TED Talk, that was an ordeal and a half to get there. All of those things are building blocks to get you where you're at. Would I go back and not go through incest if I could? Absolutely. But the journey and all of those experiences has also molded me into who I am today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. So so where you are today, if you could give and share some of your advice to somebody who is just at the point of where you were years ago, I think of them as like budding advocates, people who are maybe are thinking about writing a book, thinking about telling their story. They want to follow in your footsteps, right? What pieces of advice would you give them? What are some maybe important steps, things that we should consider for anyone who's just starting out in an advocacy journey?
My number one thing I tell everybody is to figure out what's your why and your purpose. That's the number one thing. Facebook and social media gives you a unique opportunity to plug in with community. There's groups out there like yours, Incest AWARE, SAN, NASCA, Brave and Unbroken Project. Get plugged into these community groups and learn what's out there. Because if you're going to create something new, you want to try and create something that's new and different. Don't try to duplicate something that exists. That's a big piece of it. But also learn what's going on in your local community. What legal and law things are going on? What are your statute of limitations? We've had to do statute of limitation law in Washington. That was a big focus 2 years ago. What about comprehensive sexual education in your schools? What are you doing with that? What does it mean? Who do you need to battle to make sure things are happening? Get in touch with your school districts. So you really need to learn the layout and the environment and what is in alignment with your purpose and your why. And then once you've got that, plug in with a mentor and really learn about how to evolve to where you want to go. And that where you want to go is fluid. It can shift. COVID hits, you might have to fling the sails the other direction, right? Just like we had to do. But start small, write a blog. You got to get comfortable telling your story. You've got to get comfortable having people know your dirty, dark secrets of your family. If it's, a family situation or an assault situation, if you're going into advocacy in this scenario, because that's your past and your history, you want to be able to be comfortable talking about it. So those are the things that I would say would be the beginnings. And then you evolve and you evolve and you evolve. And there's so much learning. I learn every day. We were just talking about this equity, diversity, inclusion work. I'm a pretty ignorant white person who's learning a ton of stuff. The intersectionality between race and incest, between adverse childhood experiences and kids and race and inequities. And there's so much to learn and so much to do. And I live in a community that really needs to know more. And so I need to know more. And so that's where we're at. Continue to learn. And that's an everyday process. So that's what I would say.
Yes, always learning, always being open to learn. And I think through, COVID has provided, even though it's been so devastating, it's provided a lot of opportunities to meet and learn from so many people that we never, ever would have had a chance to connect with. People from all over the world and all different perspectives and backgrounds and all of that. So, I agree. That's just so important to always be learning and not to be afraid to make mistakes.
Absolutely. So true. Yeah, it's so true.
We've all done it. I want to ask you one more question before we move to Q&A and allow people so patiently listening to you, soaking up everything that you have to say. So if we fast forwarded, 10 or 20, 25 years from now, where do you think we will be at with incest prevention? What do you think will be different? What do you think we might still be grappling with?
When our story first came out, so it was 94. Well, I'll go back. Even before then, like 82, 84, I think it was the first time I seen a movie that might closely relate to my story. I think it was Ted Danson in the Attic or some movie, a TV movie. Like then it was like 1 and 2, I heard. In 94, we're talking about 1 and 4. Now we're at 1 and 10 is the statistics. I was just double checking today. Where do we want to be in 10 years? I would love to say none, but I don't think we'll be there, unfortunately. And I do really feel like we have got to continue to educate. It's so vitally important. And the other piece that I really, really think we've got to focus on, and I've just started thinking a lot about it, is with ACEs and adverse childhood experiences and the trauma that just gets passed generationally over and over and over. And how do we really combat that? Because I think there's so much, although abusers don't always abusers don't always, those who get abused don't always abuse. I don't mean that, but I do think that traumatic things get passed generationally. And I think that there's something we can do there. I do believe there's work that to be done. And I also think that, like in our state in Washington, I don't know that a lot's being done around adverse childhood experiences and recidivism rates in prisons. I don't think we ask a prisoner, what has happened to you? You know, and Oprah, God bless her, you know, she's been talking about this stuff for years, and now there's a book out, What Happened to You, right? And this is stuff that we've all pondered for years. My biological father is from poor upstate New York. His brother is also an offender. What, you know, where does this root from? Where is this going on? What is the research? So I think there's a lot still to learn, so much to learn. And I think that there's so much that we could be doing in our communities and government wise, and funding that could be put in directions to really, really stop the spread of child abuse and incest. So I think there's things that we need to do there. And I think there is funding that we really need to push towards childhood abuse prevention and incest abuse prevention in our communities. I think our governments really, really need to step it up. Mental health prevention, you know, mental health awareness. I think there's such an intertwined like spider web between all of those topics. And I think 10 years, 15 years from now, I want to hope that we're further down the road, but I think we need a bigger commitment from resources with a lot of funding.
I could not agree with you more on that. I think that's such a huge lack. And I could keep talking to you for a long, long, long time. But we're going to stop it there for just the discussion portion. And before we cut the recording and allow people to have a chance to weigh in and ask you questions. But I want to thank you for being so transparent and showing your true self and really helping others to be able to learn from your journey, because that's really what it is all about, is the progression and the development of ourselves as advocates. It doesn't happen overnight. We don't have to wake up one day and be a Pennie. You know, this is a long process and a hard process, and you've given us a lot to chew on. So thank you so much for that.